lateness. It wasn't as a result of the cab being late. Graham has summed up the position precisely, so has our brother here. But let me just say this. I think we've got to take this extremely seriously now, because I'm a London MP. If we allow this government to continue on the way it is doing in terms of deregulation, to be honest, the cab trade will die over the next decade if we're not careful. And that's because they're intent on deregulation. Cameron and Osborne, if you remember, welcomed Uber. They were arguing this would be a benefit to the society, there'd be more people employed and all the rest of it. And yet, if you're a London cab driver, you know better than anyone else at the moment, we're under complete threat. We had the deregulation bill, we had Uber come along, and then we have out there people with rickshaws, but menaces on the bloody road, quite honestly, undermining the trade as well. So I'm concerned now that if we don't win this argument about a proper statutory definition that we can then ensure there's some enforcement of, we could be in a situation where we lose the trade altogether over the next decade. And I think that's how serious the threat is at the moment. Is Mark White here, my constituent? Mark is here. Mark spends more time on Twitter than he does driving his car. Mark will tell you, follow him on Twitter, because it's a good day-by-day example of what people are suffering from at the moment. Try to just earn a living as a result of what the threat is at the moment, and also as a result, to be frank, of lack of enforcement of the existing legislation. That's why we're arguing for a very clear definition in law that we can then use to enforce and regulate. This government has been intent on complete deregulation right the way across public services. And we need to make sure we're clear with people, we are a public service. This is a public service. And it's been developed over generations. There was in our briefing we've given to MPs, we say actually it's 400 years in London since the first cabs arrived. Gerald hailed that at the time. The issue for us is over that period of time, we've developed a system which, to be frank, keeps people safe, provides a good service at a reasonable price. What we're finding, we've included in the briefing that we've circulated, we've included example after example where deregulation has taken place elsewhere, and also on some vehicles, the cowboys out there, where it's unsafe, where women have been attacked in particular about travelling the cabs because they're unsafe as well, because of that deregulation. Graham mentioned the issue around insurance. The cowboys out there, as you know, to be frank, ignore insurance regulations themselves, and that includes, I have to say, the rickshaws become my first obsession at the moment. And right way across the piece, everything we've built up to protect our passengers is being undermined as a result of deregulation. And I think it's one of those things, you know, we've got to explain to people. Once you've lost it, it's gone forever, to be frank, and you'll look back and think, why can't I hire somewhere where I feel safe, or my wife or my children can travel safely and I've got confidence in it? And that's what's happening at the moment. Now, I think if we can get the arguments across, the seriousness of this threat, I think we can build up a cross-party majority in here to get the regulation through. But we need help on that. We need your help on that. The arguments that have been put forward, you've had Graham, Gerald, you had Ian Labour, and others, David Lammy and others, they've been coming here. And our brother here, who used to be a cab driver, he's gone down in the world, Clive, but never mind. He used to earn an honest living. No. I've been putting the arguments consistently over the recent period, and we've been building up an element of support, but we need your help now on the breakthrough. The lobby today is important. We've got to start eyeballing individual MPs to explain to them the threat that there is, not just to the trade, but to their constituents now, their constituents. And what I'd like you to do, in addition to the lobby today, what we'd like you to do as well is start booking appointments with your local MPs back in the constituencies. Invite them down to meet you or go to their offices to ask for an appointment at their surgery and take them through the arguments. And then the first step of them expressing their support is to sign the early day motion that Graham has put down, which sets out the arguments and puts in the demand itself. But then the second stage of that is get them to link it up with us, or the RMT Parliamentary Group and others, when we do the push for the new legislation. When we look to see either we amend existing legislation that's going through, or we demand a completely new bill that will be put before the House itself. And we'll look at the parliamentary devices to how we do that. But it's important now that you help us build up that momentum and body of support. And I think you've got to get across the urgency of this matter, the urgency, not just for the traders, as I say, but for their constituents. We could be in a situation soon where the cowboys begin to rule the roads, certainly in London and beyond as well. And you can see that beginning to happen in your day-to-day experiences already. And we've got to call a halt to that. Because I think we're getting to the situation where we could be a tipping point if we're not careful. So we've got to shake these individual MPs up and recognise actually there's large numbers of votes in this, not just us, our members and their families and all the rest of it, but the travelling public as well, who are concerned about the safety of their families as they travel. So thanks for coming today, but today is the beginning of a campaign of lobbying now over the next 6 months, so we bring more MPs in to support us and we press for the legislation. This is too important for the whole community for it to be seen as just one group of workers trying to protect themselves. It's much broader than that. It's about safety, it's about delivery of a public service, and it's making sure MPs recognise their responsibilities to protect that service. Thank you very much.
Once again, thank you very much, John. David Lammy, MP, would like to address the meeting.
Let me just say a few words about the London context. I think that the landscape we had in London, going back 5, 6, 10 years, was about right. I'm from Tottenham, ordinary background like most Labour MPs. My mother would have gone ballistic if I'd got into a black hat. But later on in life, when I became a barrister, I took a lot of delight in getting into a black hat. And locally in Tottenham, I relied on a minicab service. Well, what's happening is the minicabs have disappeared. And a system that we should preserve, the black cab, is under serious, serious strain. It's just to say that this business of deregulation has to be fought. You know, if you go back a few years ago, in London and much of the country, we regulated gambling. If you wanted to go and have a little flutter, there were a couple of William Hill, Ladbrokes, you could go and have a little flutter. Came along, we deregulated it, now it's proliferating our high street. Can't escape it. People got massive addiction problems, it's ruining families. We're deregulating in this area without consultation. People are being harmed. There are too many private hire vehicles on the roads. The licences have gone from 53,000 to 77, 83,000, so I don't know what it is, but it's too many. We're worried about congestion. You've got to have a degree of regulation. So, we're quite right. Unions, lobbying our MPs, bringing this now into Parliament. Let's get this written down properly and campaign for it. Don't forget when you're lobbying your members of Parliament, I'm just looking at the complexion and tone of the room, it's helpful to take some women along to the meeting, because actually they're really vulnerable in some of these vehicles. And the bottom line is, for any member of Parliament, how can you go out and defend a company that doesn't pay its tax? You don't pay your tax, well, of course. We've got to stand up for ordinary people. So I get a sense of momentum here, and this lobby is very important. Just one last point. Real worries about Transport for London. Real worries about their ability to be responsive in this area. You know that I want to be the next Mayor of London, but I will tell you this. I'm quite sure that all of my Labour colleagues believe that there's got to be some reining in Transport for London. Frankly, if they'd come along to a Labour Mayor, Uber, judicial review, I'll see you in court, you would have fought it.
Excuse me,
there's been a caving
this isn't for election year.
This
isn't for election year, Robert. You're not a member of the RFD group.
There's been a caving in, and so I just want to say that Transport for London with any sane mayor can be reined in without the legislation. And anyone worth their salt should stand up.
Thank you very much. Okay, thank you very much. I'm going to ask Clive Efford to speak now because he's expressed a wish to get away.
Yeah, sorry, I've got a meeting at 4 o'clock. I used to be, I was 11 years a London taxi driver, a green badge. My sister's a taxi driver, my brother-in-law, my nephew, my grandfather was a taxi driver, so you can't fool me, right? The issue that this really hinges on is whether this device that Uber use via mobile phones is a meter that's attached to the cab or not. And it seems to me that TfL had the right to rule that that is a meter. It's a chip that's in your gearbox that communicates the distance that you've travelled. It's exactly the same form of communication that the mobile phone is using with Uber's, through Uber's app. And it stands to reason that if it seems to me anyway, but I'm not a technician, but if the mobile phone connecting through an app is not a meter, neither is yours. Because it seems to communicate in the exact same way. When I used to drive around, it was a bit of wire. Apparently it's all electronic now and communicates the same way. And so TfL, in my opinion, have always had the power to be able to rule Uber out of order, and should have done so and forced them to challenge them, not wait for the courts. Because what's happened in the meantime is, of course, you've now got a huge network, a huge industry that's built up, exploded onto the streets through Uber, where they are now, what 15,000 cabs across London now? And so dismantling that becomes more of a problem than stopping it in the first place, because TfL didn't act. And, I don't know how many of you, I'm not going to ask you how many of you voted for Boris, but too many cab drivers did. That's the truth. And they thought he was a bit of a laugh. But he's not. He's actually, a free marketeer, and he says he's on the side of. I'll go as far back as manganese bronze. I don't know if any of you can remember when Michael Portillo told us we all had to have wheelchair adapted vehicles. We never really got to the bottom of who made money out of manganese bronze and whether Michael Portillo had shares. I'm not saying he did, allegedly, but whether he had shares in manganese bronze, because 20,000 cabs had to be changed in 4 years, and they made a fortune. I picked a guy up on the street who had one of these tokens, because he was a guy who invested in manganese bronze, and they gave him a token to have a free ride in a cab. He just walked up and gave it to me, expecting me to take it. I didn't know what it meant, but I had a long chat with him, and he explained to me how the shares in manganese bronze had exploded after Michael Portillo's announcement that we had to change the cash. So, the regulations here are there, in my opinion. We've just got to impress upon Boris and David Cameron and his mates, because we all know that one of the people who works with Uber is a close friend of David Cameron. We need to impress upon them that we've got not just an industry here, we've got part of the culture and history of London in the London taxi industry. I know it affects other parts of the country as well. And it's about time they stepped up to the plate and defended it, because once it's gone, there's a status symbol for London as a tourist destination, as a place to do business that will have gone forever. And Uber is seriously threatening cabs. Parts of my constituency I call the London taxi driver.